Hello and welcome to another episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon with Drake and Marie. Today we have a great episode for you. We're going to delve further into plotting by means of example by discussing book 2 of our series Magic Fall and where we want to go with this now intrigue-driven story. But before we get into that, I am Marie Mullaney and I'm one of your hosts. I also run a YouTube channel on fantasy world building and I write epic fantasy. And with me, as always, is my co-host Drake.
And I am an award-winning novelist. I teach writing all over the world and I write.
And we are going to take you on a great ride today. And if you want us to take other people on a great ride today and also encourage us to keep making episodes like this, we need you to hit that thumbs up button, share, subscribe, get the word out there that this podcast exists. We took a couple of weeks off after Comic-Con and our numbers dipped, as they always do, because that's the way algorithms work. But we are steaming ahead and looking good for the algorithm picking us up. So give it a little helping hand and share it far and wide. Okay. So last time that we discussed Magic Fall Book 1, we discussed the setup of the priesthood and the government, the pure blood government. So the priesthood is now going to be fully adapted folk, and the government is our pure blood folk, and they both basically work together to ensure that the effectively magic using half adapted remain kind of in control.
However,
yes,
as far as the world knows, priests are pure blood.
Correct.
And priests that is how, well, I was going to say, that's how Moda and his people knew how to do all that covert camouflage and everything, because that was actually invented by the priesthood to hide the fact that they were fully adapted. And I actually was thinking about that. I can actually see a reason. So a lot of bad rules come from good intentions. You know, the famous line, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I was thinking about that. If it's only a small percentage of people who survive the transformation, but once you do that, then you have this thing. I can understand the government going, yeah, but 98% of them are going to die. Like, we shouldn't tell them that this is an option, because some might try it, but they're going to die. And we can't afford to lose the population. We're one last city of humanity. And so I can see them going, you know what, you guys need to, we need to come up with something to hide the fact that you guys are fully adapted, so that we don't, accidentally, and, it just over the 1,000 years, it's changed into what it is today. But I was thinking that's actually a kind of that seems like it would be an honest conversation that they would have. And then, for the betterment of others, that's always the way it works. When government is doing things that are better for us, it usually ends up being worse for us. So I can see that as kind of the reasoning behind why they did it.
Yeah. And it's like it was okay at the beginning, and then it steadily becomes, less and less okay as it becomes more and more just rote ingrained, as opposed to actually a useful law.
And I think that also feeds why this splinter group, not that I, care about trying to make the bad guys relatable or whatever, but it does honestly lead to why this splinter group were like, why are we hiding up here when we could be living down there? Yeah. And then now it's been corrupted because they ended up running the Helios down there. Helios kept doing its plan, which it still thinks is the best way to do it, even though these were already fully adapted and it really didn't need to do anything. It was still in that mindset of, the only way I can save humanity is to turn them into Borg. And so I can see that as a logical progression of how Moda's people have kind of become Moda's people.
So I don't want to call us Jane Austen exactly, but we effectively have a story that actually has no villains. there are simply people with different motivations. They are all, at its heart, seemingly good motivations. The problem is all of those good motivations are good for, someone else. This is going to be good for you. That's why I'm doing it, because it's good for you, not for me. And that is a very dangerous and slippery slope.
Yeah. So like that is really cool. And another thing to think about for the podcast listeners is one of the magic that I feel about plotting is it allows you, especially when you get into like the second book or the third book or whatever. Sorry, let me turn on my do not disturb. Once you get into like the second book or third book or whatever, you have this general, like we knew from the very beginning that Helios was going to be an AI. Now we thought the ghost was going to actually be a human soul that was put in there, and we figured out that it's going to be different now. Listen to the last podcast, and you'll hear us stumble upon that. But one of the beautiful things about plotting is when you get into that second book, you can take everything that was written in the book is canon. That has to stay. But all the ideas that you thought you were going to do doesn't necessarily have to happen. You just have to make sure that any adjustments or changes that you're doing fit with the canon that's already there. So like all these changes, like turning Ghost from a human soul to a splintered off piece of this AI does not change the first book in any way, shape, or form. It fits, like a glove. And so that's the beautiful thing about this is, and kind of my point in going down this rabbit hole is to say, don't lock yourself into ideas. You have to lock yourself into canon. Whatever's been produced and published, you're stuck with. That's kind of the thing. Now, I got the bonus of rewriting the Genesis saga since it went out of print and all of that other stuff. So that put me in a kind of an interesting situation with that. But for pretty much, you don't get that opportunity very often. And so a lot of times, you are stuck with what, and that's why I like plotting, because then you can actually think about that. But it's also why both me and Marie, when we were working on that first book, we always kept this, okay, I don't know where this idea is going to go, but it's a cool idea. And the best thing about that is those threads, since they're not necessarily integral to the story itself, you could end up not pulling on that thread. So, we have these things, but they're not Chekhov's guns, because like the face painting with Moda in book 1, he was dressing himself up as a half adapted, but like we never explained where that came from or anything like that, because it didn't affect the story. We don't need, and that's the other thing, is you don't want to nail everything down, because you could use them in other ways, like we're doing now with this. We're using the face painting in a completely different way, but it matches the vagueness that we just had them doing it. And so if we didn't ever explain that, it wouldn't be a Chekhov's gun. Nobody would ever, think about it, because just, oh, well, they're just painting their faces. As opposed to now they're going to learn that there's this whole technology that's been developed around, hiding the fact that people are, either adapted or half adapted, in this community. And Burry's going to be able to put that together. Well, actually, it's Laron's going to be able to put that together because he saw them doing it. And so, well, I guess Burry saw Moda.
Yeah, it could be either of them, but it's going to be interesting nonetheless, because
it'd actually probably be Burry, since she's going to be introduced into the priesthood.
Yeah.
So, because she did see Moda as a fully adapted, right?
She did, yeah.
Yeah,
she did.
So when you're, this is just a kind of a cautionary tale. When you're creating this stuff, if it doesn't affect the story that you're actually actively telling, you don't have to explain every minute detail, so that later, if you do need to use that in a different way or whatever, it fits with whatever you've done. And then also, the second thing is just, as we keep saying, don't lock yourself into any ideas that you've had. Just because you think it's going to work this way, as you get deeper into the creation of the story, you want your muse to be able to stretch her legs and think differently, and maybe take you in different directions that you didn't even think, because it's going to make the story better. So it was just like, I love that. And what we are doing on this podcast is literally what happens to me every time I'm working on any project that I've ever worked on. This is always the way it happens. And the deeper you get into it, it still keeps happening. So, just think about it like that.
Okay, so I endorse that. It's pretty much how I say you should always world build. So, so we are going to make our priesthoods are fully adapted, masquerading mostly as pure bloods. Now, our priesthood, according to our canon, also teaches our kids, our half-adapted, how to use Jiren. Now, that got me a little bit like, okay, but how do you teach somebody when you can't do it yourself? Yeah. And I came up with two potential solutions that we can talk about. One, we can either go, okay, they were half adapted before who could manipulate Jiren and therefore academically teach it. Okay. So they are actually then on the lookout for people who understand Jiren manipulation really well and can therefore explain it and teach it, and it won't be a dire loss to the city to lose their actual Jiren manipulation. So people who bake, for example, would be a good choice because, you know, the city's not going to miss a few bakers, whereas the city might very well miss like plastic smiths and people like that who use Jiren to shape the plastics that they need to replace the shields that fall off, etc.
Well, so I was thinking it like this, because I also went down that path after we had finished. I think that the priesthood, because we never said that they didn't, but I think there's going to be half adapted in the priesthood. And I think that within the priesthood, there will be an entire cadre of priests that don't know the truth.
Yes,
and
obviously.
You know, they're more of the ones that are out there doing whatever. So, and those priests, I think, are so. What I was thinking is, if only 2% survive naturally, or 5% or whatever the percent, you know, small percent, definitely less than 10%.
Yeah.
If they're the only ones that naturally survive the adaptation, and they want to keep that a secret because they don't want to get people's hopes up and so on and so forth. We did establish that you don't become adapted by choice. That if you overuse Jiren or if you're exposed to the planet too much, it triggers your adaptation process. So we've already, you know, kind of nailed that in canon. What we can do with what we haven't fleshed out, which I think would work really well, is there's signs that if people have these certain things, they are more likely to survive the adaptation. So it's still a small percentage, but I ran into this adapter that has this thing, and you know, 50% of the people that have that thing will survive, or 60% of the people that have that thing will survive. And then they look for other things. So that's where I think Burry can actually be pulled into it. Either she has these things, which we would have to look at exactly what she did and see if we can finagle one of them to being one of those. Or, like we talked about in the last podcast, there's something, because of what Laron has done and the special magical equipment that they've got on the planet, it makes the priest think she has these things. And so they pull her in. And I kind of like that way, because it means that she's not going to survive the transition naturally. And I kind of like that, because they think she will. And so they start letting her deeper and deeper and deeper into the truth, thinking that she's going to become one of them, when in actuality, she's going to discover, oh, they're going to kill me. Like, I'm not, you know, when she has to learn that some people survive this transition, she has to learn what are the signs that they look for and all this other stuff. And then as she goes that, she starts realizing, oh, no, this wasn't me. This was Ghost. And this was that thing. And this was like, oh, crap. But she also can't admit this at that point, because she'll have crossed that barrier of, well, now you're kind of knowing stuff that you're not allowed to know. And so if you aren't one of us, then we have to eliminate you.
Yeah.
And so I think that, so it not giving them control over it. And then that means that a lot of the priesthood, because if the priesthood centers around the manipulation of Jiren, and that's their, you know, that's their whole vocation and everything like that, then it makes sense that the mass body of the priesthood are going to be Jiren wielders. And then it also still makes sense that the fully adapted hide as human purebloods, because the rulership is purebloods. And so that gives them this kind of automatic, well, I'm a pureblood. Of course I'm in charge. Yeah. Like, you can't be in charge if you're not a pureblood. And that keeps that that kind of mentality for
Hierarchy.
the city
Yeah.
in place, but it also creates the division between the actual government and the actual priesthood, because there's not a single purebred human in the priesthood. They're all fully adapted. And so the government, and of course, again, in the government, it's going to be the same thing. The vast majority of government officials don't realize the truth, but, people like Laron's father and that echelon, they all know the truth. And so there's going to be a natural animosity between those two groups, because we talked about we want them pitted against each other. And that's just this great way of, well, of course they're against each other. We are actual pureblood humans. You are masquerading as pureblood humans because we need you to. Like, we can't expose you because we actually need you to masquerade as pureblood humans. But you're a freak. Like, you're not one of us. Like, you're even lower in my eyes. If I'm a pureblood government, you're lower than a half adapted. Like, I know you're in charge of them, which irks me, but in my eyes, you're actually even less. You are so far away from being human. You're as far as you can be. Like, and that would hurt my sensibilities and my view of the world and everything like that. And then, of course, the fully adapted would be like, you can't even survive here. Like, you're pathetic. So, like, I think there's this beautiful
we
balance.
expose you to the planet and you're just dead.
Right, exactly. You expose us and we just leave, and then we take all of our half adapted with us, because they can, with work and effort, they can survive down there. They don't have to be fully encased in a protective suit. So, they do need to, we've already established, they need to purge and all of that other stuff. So, I mean, now life is easier on the city, even for the fully adapted. So, yeah, I mean, I just think that we stumbled upon this balance to this society that we had no idea. I mean, we had general, I mean, even in the first book, we talked about the priests and the government and blah, 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 blah. We knew that we were kind of going in that direction, but we hadn't figured all this stuff out. And I just think that, like, this kind of stumbling has made me giddy on where this story is going.
So one of the things that I want to talk about is Ghost in relation to Buri. So we established that Ghost can hop between their arms, right? He
Wasn't he
said
just
that.
now in both?
So that's the thing. Are we going to put him in both?
I think so. And because we can take that, so it's just like when I create magic systems, I talk about limitations, which is where you can take the magic away from the people. The limitation would be Ghost is in both. However, if he can't sync up, then it's two different ghosts until they actually get to the point where they can sync up. So, like, let's say in the priesthood, we need Buri to learn.
Let's just square that with canon briefly, because he actually left Lyron's arm to go to Buri in order to fight the thing infesting her head.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Okay. It's
Now,
been a minute since I read that scene.
Now it's not
Fixable.
It's not impossible to move towards splitting, because at that moment it had been a newish ghost that had been freshly installed, and he needed all of the processing power. So it might well have been like, no, I can't just make a copy of myself because,
Right.
Reasons.
Well, there was only, we already know that there's multiple copies of Ghosts.
Yes.
And the copy of Ghost that we started with is dead.
Yes.
We killed off that original Ghost.
Yes.
So the Ghost that Laron has now is different. And I definitely want to play on that to where there's going to be times where Laron will say something and be like, oh, right, that wasn't you.
Yeah.
Like, I think we should remind the audience of that in ways that we can do. So I'm going to retract what I said. Now that you've gone down this path, I actually think, because you're right, in the future, we can always come up with a way where Ghost now has enough of his pieces and he can say, oh, I can actually be in both of you at the same time. But we don't ever even need to do that. So since the story doesn't require it right now, and having the complication of the fact that Ghost has to choose between the two, and they have to at least be in decent proximity somehow, like we could make it, or I guess
or
within
connected,
right,
or in a phone call or something.
Right. They have a they probably have, massive data terminals and, Wi-Fi everywhere. And because they have, I mean,
Yeah.
they have their banking and everything else in their arms. And so
Yes.
all that has to be fully connected.
All the
So I
time.
would assume in the city, unless there's special radiation zones, again, we can take it away. But
Yeah.
so I think while they're in the city, he can jump back and forth without issue. However, we could, because the priesthood is built on secrecy, and so is the government, really, we could actually do this for both, where they have areas that are disconnected.
Faraday cages. They can have Faraday
Well,
cages.
kind of like that. What I was thinking of, because they would still need their own. So more like behind um hardcore firewalls, where we still are connected out there, but you can't get in. Like no traffic can get across this firewall without, because they're way. I mean, they had enough technology to travel to another planet, so I'm sure that their firewalls are a little better than our Cisco routers. so, um, so yeah, so sort of like a Faraday cage where it does that, but we can also do an area where it is a Faraday cage where you cannot get anything in and out, but that means that you have no data in there at all.
So
I was thinking
that was where the ghost version in the lab was stored. Yeah. He called it an air gap because that's what we call it. We call it an air gap server.
Right.
It's got nothing but air between it and the network.
Yep. Yeah, but that wasn't a Faraday cage. That's literally, it's just not connected to anything.
Yes, correct.
So yeah, and we can also do that where they have their own internal network that is air gap from everything else, or because that seems problematic. I just think they should have the technology that has, this amazing firewall that without AI, and again, they don't have AI. So it would also
there are degrees of secrecy, right? So firewalls will put you inside a certain perimeter, but the really like the enormously super secret stuff is probably on inaccessible servers because there ain't no such thing as a perfect firewall. It's just, it doesn't exist.
Well, so it kind of does in this, or it kind of could in this society if we wanted it to, because it could be hackable only by AI, and AI doesn't exist anymore. And so it would give us the opportunity to, like them normally, they have no ability to get to it, but Ghost could figure out a way. So like, I'm just saying, if we ever need that possibility, so we can introduce it as, oh yeah, no, this is a perfectly secure internal network. And it's never been breached in 1,000 years. It can't be breached, blah, blah, blah. And we could just leave it like that. Again, that could be a thread we don't pull. But later on, we might go, actually, the AI can do it.
Yeah.
And so Ghost can figure that out. I'm just saying it would, if we if we do an air gapped server area, then that's one complication they have to physically overcome. And we can't use Ghost for that, which probably is a good thing. But we could also do it the other way where it's impenetrable unless we decide that an AI could penetrate it.
There is no reason why you can't have both.
True.
This is really one of those opportunities where you say, why not both?
It is true. And you know what? I just thought of something what would be actually kind of interesting. And we need to put this in because we could use it later. This is another one of those ideas that I was talking about where it's something you put in and don't explain. But I would bet you that the priesthood in an air gap server environment has a piece of Helios.
Helios, not Ghost.
Helios, where they've kept him, they've studied him, they go in and talk to him. He is still the exact same Helios that we have out there is the same one. Now they can't communicate, so it's now evolved differently. And we could even make the one internally, the one that the priests are keeping in a cage, insane at this point. After 1,000 years of just basically being on this smaller server. But there are so many story hooks that come out of that. That could be a way that they have to go and take this other Helios and rescue it, or they can't. Maybe Ghost needs that to be able to hook up to the Helios that's in the sky. It could be that it gets out and wreaks havoc on its own. It becomes a third player in this AI war. I mean, there's just so many story hooks that we can have if they have this little pet Helios that they've been studying. And that would be like since their religion is very anti this, having that in the center of their sanctum would be the most blasphemous, hedonistic thing that you could have. But again, there's a reason you would want that. We need this because we need to study it. We need to study our enemy. And maybe they actually think it's the only one, that they've actually captured a god. And they don't even realize that it's up in space and it's been plotting for all this time trying to get back down.
They think that the builder destroyed the other parts of Helios, and this is all that was left.
It's all that's left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just a lot of story hooks can come out of that. And again, I don't know if we'll ever use it. But that's the point, is to come up with ideas that could be used for different things later on. But if you never come up with a way to use them, you just don't use them.
So I think that last time where we'd gone through our everyman moments and our kind of introduction to it and the things that the characters kind of need to do immediately on coming back to the city. But we had not yet come up with our calls to action. So our guys are back in the city. Mm-hmm. And they're pretty much like, it's all golden, right? I mean, from their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
The once in 300 years event is passed. Yes, okay, nobody's paying attention to the fact that they're saying that there's this town out there or whatever. Everybody's saying, yes, we know, shut your silly gob, kid. But I mean, maybe the adults are right? That could be a.
Okay, let me throw something at you. So let me throw two things at you. First of all, 80% of this story is going to be told separately. So Burry's going to have, and then they're not going to come together until they've both learned that they. So I think what's going to happen is they're both going to have their own call to action, their own path. They don't realize that it's only half the story, so they think they can solve it. And when they get to a point, they're both going to realize, oh crap, I can't solve this without the other's help. And then when they get together and they get all this extra information of what the other half of the story was, then that's where the solution is going to come from. However, where I was going to go with that, for what you were saying, what if the government doesn't know about the fully adapted down on the planet? That was an internal breaking inside the priesthood, and the priests are embarrassed by that and have kept it a secret. And so that actually would give us something for the Laron story that would be different. So Burry's story would be about, oh, we think you can actually become one of us, or there's a chance for it, so we're going to start grooming you for this path. And Laron's story could be, he tells his father this, and his father's like, wait, what? Are you serious? Yes, I saw it. This, that, and he's like, all right, don't tell anybody about this. And then Laron's father could start setting something into motion that Laron gets hooked into or whatever. Because that might be a great fuel for, what if the politicians are now looking for a way to get rid of the priesthood and actually replace them with full-blooded humans? They can't use Jiren anyway. So why couldn't a pure-blood human do the role of being the high priests and then just keep the half-adapted below us and let them do their job, managing everything and training everything and doing everything that they're doing. And then we now have control. And we've been trying to get rid of these pathetic little fully adapted for decades, centuries.
Wait. What about the fully adapted keep the city running? No fully adapted, no replacement of those radiation.
Okay. Yeah, we did talk about that. I forgot about
because
that.
Because otherwise they would absolutely have been a war.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
But this is still a game of one-upmanship, right? So the government, the politicians are now like, okay, so the priests had an internal schism that no one ever told us about. How very interesting.
Hmm.
You know, um, and they could be quite interested in making contact with these fully adapted on the surface of the planet.
They could go another direction too.
Mm.
They could go, wait a minute, the priesthood has a secret town down there of their people that they haven't told us about. So they might not even know that it was a break between the two, that they think that the priests are actually doing some conniving thing working
Yes.
against them.
They could be going like, the priests are breaking the bargain.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then hence like investigating like what is going on. Are the priests actually working against us? Is anything still working down in the bottom of the, have they stopped replacing the radiation things? Like,
What
because
if?
how do
What
they
if?
check?
Right. What if that is Laron's side of it? Laron's father starts going, oh crap, the priesthood is trying to take the city down. The priesthood is trying, they've got now enough adapted living, out there. They have a full-fledged city that's making food and everything like that. They don't need us anymore. So what if they confuse the fact that the priesthood is internally warring and the priesthood is actually trying to, and because that would actually be a cool thing, because now that pits Laron against Burry, where he's like, wait a minute, you went in there? Well, then you're my enemy. Like, I thought we were friends. How could you do something like this? And she's like, no, you don't understand. And like that would be a great misunderstanding between the two of them, because if Laron gets taken in this path of, oh, because you're right, we know why the half adapted can't be replaced, because they are integral in keeping the city aloft. But if the purebloods start thinking, oh, they're the ones that are taking us down, all of these problems that we've been having, all these tremors and all this, they're doing this on purpose. They're going to take this city down because they don't need us anymore. Purebloods, I mean, what do purebloods have? They only have power because the money that they have, the currency that they have up there is valuable, and then they control the police force or whatever. But they don't need, because they have enough. Maybe that's another thing they think about. They were like, I knew 100 years ago we shouldn't start letting half adapted into the police force, because wasn't the captain?
Yeah, she's half adapted.
He was half adapted.
Yeah.
And so that could be a burr in their saddle where they're going, we shouldn't have done this. But we didn't have the people. I mean, there's not as many purebloods. There's only, we are definitely the minority.
Yeah.
And so this could be, sort of like when you think about that old thing of like back on the slave plantations down in the South, you'd have, 1,000 slaves or 500 slaves or whatever, and 7, white people. Like, why, like 500 people? Why didn't they, because you just have this, you fall into this hierarchy, and more comfortable. So it could be something like that. So Laron could get sucked down. Laron's story could be them getting sucked down into this, oh, we actually now have to take out these priests. Like, and then that, but if we take them out, how are we going to replace those? Well, we'll have to figure that out. We'll have to beef up our equipment. We'll have to send our people down there, whatever. Because they do have, we've already established they have anti-rad suits and everything like that. So,
yeah, but obviously, like there is anti-rad and there is anti-rad.
Right,
like,
right. But think about this conflict that starts brewing here gives this huge opportunity to Helios to take advantage of. So maybe he didn't have a plan other than this 300-year plan, because he's never had a way to get into the city. But once the politicians and the priests start fighting, that, we'd have to figure it out. But that opens up something that allows Helios's people to be able to do what they're doing. And of course, they're going to learn Burry and Laron, because at the beginning, they are going to be at war with each other. Like, they are going to believe Burry's going to buy into the priesthood thing in the beginning, and Laron buys into the government thing in the beginning. And, they start actually being on the wrong side. And then that would be the overcome, as they figure out that there's a third party that, is now coming in to take the city down. And we're still going to have the city hit the ground at the end of this book. But now that makes them, and it also makes the politicians and priests have to work together. Like, it's not just Burry and Laron. They're the ones that figure out that this third party is doing this. But then I would think that they have to bring in obviously now they're going to have to overcome it. They're the heroes. So they have to do whatever the thing is that needs to stop the complete destruction of the city. However, the priests and the purebloods are going to have to work together once the city hits the ground.
So
So
I'm liking Leiron's call to adventure. So Leiron's call to adventure is basically telling his father about the planet side adapted.
And I think Laron's father would be impressed enough with him to start now treating him more like like somebody who can actually do this stuff. Like we can see a big shift in Laron's father.
Obviously, Leiron was down on the planet and he did stuff. Like, you know, clearly he is capable at least of doing that, even if he's politically incompetent.
Right.
So if he's like, I can see his father going down the thought path of, if his engineering skill is that good that he could survive on the planet, you know, with minimal support, etc., then maybe it doesn't matter that his politics isn't that good, as long as I get him like a support structure, as long as he's gotten a politically adept wife or like, you know, associate or something along those lines. He'll still be able to kind of keep the family's name high, in principle.
I would imagine that there is an engineering corps that would have its own hierarchy too. Now it'd be under the government, but you know, all those, like here in America, all the alphabet organizations have a head.
Yeah.
And they're powerful in their own right, you know, even though they're not the president of the United States or whatever.
Yeah, and we've got those. I mean, I've got all of those. I've got the departments. There's a directorate of maintenance, external resources, transportation, waste management, etc. And all of those have got a lot of engineering capabilities.
Right. So
I think external resources would probably be the most prestigious one and the one that would make the most sense because it's the outside the city.
Right. Well, I can see Laron's father going, you know, I never thought about you doing one of these roles, and that would also be very good for our family. I always, you know, assume that it would just be politics would be the thing, and you're always just worthless at it. But I didn't even think about the fact that you could actually bring power to the family in one of these alphabet soup kind of organizations. So I can see him shifting that light. So yeah. And I think he would be satisfied with that. Of course, you're not a councilman. But being in charge of one of those directorates would still make Laron's father pretty proud. You'll never make director, you know, or assistant director or, you know, councilman, but you would still do me proud if you were in charge of one of these directorates. So yeah, I can see Laron's father going down that path.
I can also see that. Now, Buri. I've been thinking about Buri's call to adventure. What if Buri's sister is too far down the path for a transfusion? Right? Because Buri has that other device that allows her to stabilize and control, without Helios's intervention, the adaptation process. And if she does that in the hospital, you can bet that there'll be priests absolutely descending on the place to like cart off their, you know, the new fully adapted person and kind of start immediately inducting them into the priesthood and being like, listen, you can't tell anybody about this. The problem is nobody survives. Da, da, da. And it can be one, and how about Buri's storyline is her working to get inside the priesthood because she's trying to figure out where her sister's been taken.
So that works in where my mind was going, because she uses this thing as a last-ditch effort to save her sister. It appears to work, but it isn't perfect. like maybe her sister is still in pain. Maybe it takes some time for the stabilization to happen or whatever. But while she's writhing in pain, but she is fully adapted at this point. So she's, blue and all of that. The people that run the hospital, which I think should probably be priests. We didn't really line it out as priests, but we can.
There will certainly be priests,
right,
because
they
of
can
the
have
nature of the
orderlies or
hospital.
whatever,
Yeah.
and then the head people would be priests.
Yeah.
So the priests come in and they push her out and let us do our thing. She survives, but that happens off screen, and we don't know that. And then the priests come out and are like, "I'm sorry, she's dead." And then, of course, Burry would believe that at first, and so she goes home. But then we'd have to have some type of catalyst that, and it could be Teacup and that connection. I mean, there's things that we could do, but basically, we'd have to come up with, okay, she believes that her sister's dead, so that crushes her. She goes home. She's listless.
Mourning. Yeah,
I would think that. I think a good path would be that she does end up losing the bakery, but that dude is like, come work for me. It's the least I can do. I loved your sister. She would want to do this.
Yeah.
Come work for me so you won't starve. I will take care of you. And you have great talent at this. And so I think then her life settles out, and then something happens. And again, it can be one of two things. It could be that the priests come to her, because we talked about that, where something she does makes them think. And it could also be the fact that her sister survived. I mean, that could be it. Maybe it runs in families. Like, it's a thing that if one of your, it's sort of like if you're predisposed to cancer in your family, there's a big chance that you're going to have cancer, just because of the genetic connection. So it could be that with her sister surviving, and they think that she just was one of those people that survived. Now they start going, let's look at the sister. And so that could be the reason why the priests start paying attention to her as far as that. Because, I mean, one of the things that rubbed me wrong originally with the idea was that the priests, when she got back, the priests had interest in her. And I just don't think there's anything that would make them, there was nothing that happened on the adventure that would make them go, oh, we need to kill this girl. Yes, she has knowledge that if they knew she had that knowledge, they would, probably do something about it. But just coming back and keeping tight-lipped, if they just do that, then, this is a more organic way, I think, to have the priests go, oh, wait, we need to now look at this girl. And then that device again can have her do something that they go, oh yeah, definitely she's going to survive, or she's got a very high chance of surviving the transformation. Let's bring her in and start doing that. So they just start her as an acolyte. After her life is settled, she actually gets, one of those work chips where it's like, you've been called into the priesthood. Maybe that's how they do it. No one applies to be a priest. Like, there's no application process.
Yeah. You now have to come spend X amount of time. And they probably, like, if they want to recruit you into the priesthood as such, they don't want you to be there like 24/7, right? They still want you to kind of have your job and whatever. So maybe it's like you have to rotate in for every 2 hours, or maybe it's like a Jiren refresher course or something, after you've been out. So whatever the reason is, they come up with some reason and they start bringing her in. And then, but early on in that process, because we're setting this up so that it looks like Burry is outside of the line of action, right?
Yeah.
We're doing a slice of life, effectively. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which I'm not saying is bad, but obviously you can't let that go too long, because
right.
So very soon in that process, she has to either see something that makes her think her sister is alive, or something else, right? So she's got to start suspecting, and I think that she should take it to the Weaver, to her to the Tyron, I think his name is, to Tyron as well. I think we should involve him, because I don't like leaving people like, you know what I mean? Like,
right. Well, we also want to bring in that one chick that took an interest in Laron, and we already know that.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
So I think,
and I can even see opportunities for bringing in that bully.
Yeah.
It only has that one little moment in the scene, but I still think that can definitely be something that we bring him in, he somehow, and we kind of come up with a little bloodhound gang, where Laron has to put together a ragtag team of people to help him figure whatever out that he's doing. So
okay, so
like a Hardy Boys Snatching Drew mystery.
okay, so Buri needs to see something early on in that whole priestess thing, because it looks like she's going all slice of life, and then the thing happens.
But I think Teacup might be like, maybe some hooded figures are in the distance walking, and Teacup tries to go after them, and she's like, what are you doing? Like, you don't know those people. And Teacup is trying to do his, that's my owner, what are you talking about? Or, you know, one of my owners, one of my two owners.
Well, that could be a very interesting thing, because she could be like, okay, maybe like, how about I get Ghost and he helps me look, right? And then she, you know, contacts Lyron and it's like, you know, I'd like to borrow Ghost. And that can then start being kind of the conflict between them as well.
Yeah. It would have to happen early on, when he's still much more trusting and hasn't figured out that the priests are actually against them. And that's when, you know, I still love the line of, you know, how could you do this to me? When she didn't do, like, she's like,
she didn't do jack to him.
Right. Because the path that I see is, we come up with a normal tour of duty that everyone has to do, because there's no applying for priesthood. You don't come seeking the priesthood comes seeking you. And so the first step is, well, let's bring her in for this duty. And maybe it's an acolyte position where every half adapted will spend, it's sort of like the reserves here. You spend 2 weeks a year in that, but it wouldn't be once a year thing. It would be a special, because they would only do this invitation to people that they think might actually survive. And so they reach out, they bring them in for a month or two. And those that cannot, you know, that they decide, no, they're probably not going to survive it, they just say, okay, well, you know, you were here for 2 months, your 2 months is over, go away. But those that are, they can go, you know what, we would like to offer you a more permanent position. But it would still not be in the echelon. It would just still be we're still testing you out, but you've passed the smell test of what we're looking. Now let's go a little deeper. Let's actually take you to more strenuous testing or whatever.
See, the interesting thing here is, if Buri then, if she sees early on in those 2 months or whatever, the testing 2 months, and she realizes that her sister is alive, and then she maybe she can use, like, she'll be like, I need Ghost, I need to pass these tests, blah, blah, blah. So she literally uses Ghost to force her way into the priesthood, despite the fact that she probably wouldn't survive.
And so we're gonna have to come up with at least 2 or 3 plot points where she starts getting more and more convinced that her sister is alive. And the first one's gonna happen at the hospital. Like maybe before the priest gets there, the sister's in a lot of pain, but she's like, no, it still hurts, but I'm feeling a little better. And that's
nothing's burning, right? There's none of the like burn lines or whatever. She's just in pain because everything's rearranging.
It would start, but then it would, you know, instead of exploding, it would start the actual transformation. And so her first thing is, when they come in and rush her out, they were like, you know, you got to get out of here. There's a
explosion. She has to be contained.
We could go that route. I think it should be more of a, oh my God, you know, she should have already exploded by now. She may actually survive this. Get out and let us do our job to see if we can save her. And then, of course, she would be like, yeah, let me get out of the way. But again, the sister had to have gone over a hump before this happened. So she has to go, I'm going to explode. I'm going to explode. No, actually, I'm feeling better. Still in a lot of pain, but better, is when the priest pops in. They kick her out, and she's like, oh my goodness, you know, she's going to survive. And then they walk out and they're like, she died. She's like, but she was doing better. Yeah, it happens that way sometimes. You know, there's ups and downs. it's the way it happens. Like, have you ever seen somebody die of adaption
Yeah,
sickness?
exactly.
Well, no.
Yeah.
Like, I've only heard rumors. Like, yeah, unfortunately, there was nothing we could do. And so she would leave there unconvinced. She would leave there, sure, mourning her sister's death, but also with this worm in the back of her head of, I that wasn't right. It didn't feel, and like, can I see the body? No, you can't see the body. It's radiation filled now. Like, it's poisonous, whatever. But so she walks out of there, like the first way we were talking about it, she's just, okay, yeah, my sister's dead, let me go mourn it. This way would, my sister's dead, but it just didn't feel right to me.
I don't want her to lose the bakery. At least I don't want her to accidentally lose the bakery. If she goes like, okay, my sister might be dead, okay, or might not, like that is a worm thought. But I don't, because the first book for Buri was all about like not letting things sweep you away.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever happens, I want her to make the realization that she can't keep the bakery.
Oh, that's it. That's, my mind was going there as well when you start going that path. So she approaches the weaver.
Yeah.
She knows that if she continues going, she's going to lose the business anyway. And so she can get out and sell off the equipment or whatever. And maybe there's another bakery that shows up and is like, you know, I can give you an out. She's like, no, screw you. I'm not going to, this is my family's business. My mother created this, go away. And then that's her stubbornness. But then when she's like, fails again and money's getting even tighter and tighter, that's when she's like,
I wouldn't even necessarily go down that route, because money's already been tight from the last one. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that she needs to. I think especially if we're going to go with, like, she has this niggling doubt, them, you know, there's also then this drive of being able to, where she goes like, okay, so if I'm going to find out if my sister is still alive, like, maybe I can look around.
So that's not, I don't think we're there yet. If it's just the hospital scene, there's just the worm of doubt, but there's not enough for her to actually investigate something else. Like I said, there's going to have to be 2 or 3, and I think 3 things that happen that build upon this. So I think a logical question.
I think that she must, like, even in her grief, she must be like, actually, if somebody approaches her and says, look, I can give you an out of the bakery. Your sister, you know, your sister's gone. And I think that at that point, she must actually close that book, because
but I actually think that you were right. I think she, instead of my suggestion where somebody comes to her, I think she needs to go, I'm going to lose this business if I keep pigheadedly going down this. My sister was what drove it. She is gone. I have to get over that. I have to make decisions. I have to stop letting situation, you know, let her take the message, what she learned from last book, and go. And so have her go to a baker and say, look, I've got all this equipment. You know, I'm thinking about closing the bakery. I'm not there yet, but would you be interested if I would? And they were like, yeah, you know, I do this, this, and this. And then have her go to the weaver and go, hey, I'm thinking about selling the bakery, but I need a job. I really do. And he's like, you know what? I loved your sister. It's the least I can do. I hated the way things ended. She would want me to help out in any way that I can. And she's like, also, I'm not asking for a handout.
Buri is actually a very talented weaver.
Right.
Very.
Exactly. That's why she would be like, I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking for this because I'm good at this job. And he's like, yeah, of course. Like, let him do it for empathetic reasons, but let her then reject those, but just, you know, just the reasons, and take it as that job. And then that closes that chapter. And she made the decision to, I think you're right on that. I really do like that, where she takes control of her life. And that's a part of her grieving.
Yeah, it's part of her grieving, and it's part of her lessons from the last book, and it all builds up very nicely onto that kind of moment.
And I think the second thing that needs to happen is before the priests come to her. There needs to be another thing about the sister may not be dead, and we'll have to just figure out what that is. But I think that needs to be there. Then the priesthood comes and gets her, because again, we've already established why it runs in families, whatever. And so they bring her in, and then a third thing happens in there that makes her go, crap, I don't think my sister's dead.
It could be. So it could be that the thing that happens outside the temple, the second thing, could be Teacup. Because Teacup,
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, because he could be like making her, you know, her noises, and then Buri could follow him and she could see like shadowy figures going down into like the lower levels, into like the severe radiation areas of the city, and so on and so forth. Because obviously they would take the fully adapted initiates down there and kind of introduce them to it, etc., etc.
Well, that's sort of what I'm doing in the realm. You give the person that you need to keep a secret a reason that literally is world destroying if they let the secret out. So
exactly.
Yeah, that would be one of the first things that I think you would do is, okay, I got this new initiate or this new adapted. We've got to convince them not to tell anybody about this. And so they say, look, only a few percentage of people survive. So if you tell people, you're going to get their hopes up and they're going to die. Like you're going to be murdering them basically. But here's the real reason why we need to be here and take them down. And without these, the city falls, we all die, blah, 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 blah. And that would make me now, if I'm, the sister, it'd make me go, oh crap, okay. Because I've also, as the sister, I've got to be convinced of why I'm not even go back to my sister, that I'm going to leave her in life thinking I'm dead. So you got to convince me of something. And you know what? Maybe that's the third thing. When she gets in there, it's too much for the sister. So she breaks protocol. And it could be the fourth thing too, but I'm just saying, I think that's where really I think it should be the third thing. Now I'm rethinking it. What if the priesthood doesn't?
Okay, so the thing is, right? So okay, so Teacup does that. So the thing is this, right? The sister knows something that the priesthood doesn't. She
True.
knows that Burry used a device. She knows that. But she doesn't tell the priest because obviously at the beginning it's all confused and yada, yada, yada. And the more she learns in the priesthood, the more she's like, but it might not be a good idea to tell them that I'm not a natural. I'm the result of a device my sister has.
All right. So let me change.
And then she can send a message to Burry to be like,
well, actually, even more than a message. Let me run down a rabbit hole real quick. So Burry's story's done. She shows up. She does the thing with her sister. She fixes her sister. She thinks she fixed it. She gets kicked out. She finds the sister's dead. Sure, there's a little nagginess maybe in the back of her head, but she does believe, 99% she believes that her sister's dead. She goes and does the bakery, realizes that's going to realize she has to grow up, realizes she has to take things seriously. She can't just hold on to stupidity. And so she does her thing and she sets her life up and her story is finished. Like there's no hints of her sister. There's no nothing.
She's happy ever.
And then when she finally reaches a point where she's zen, that's when the sister shows up and says, I'm not supposed to be doing this, but I couldn't let you go through life thinking I'm dead. But you have to let me go. You have to. And so she would be dressed as a half adapted. She wouldn't even be adapted. Like Burry doesn't see her as fully adapted. And so she's like, look, I can't explain anything to you because now her sister's, fully on board with the plan. She just couldn't let her sister. She's like, look, I just want to tell you I'm fine. That's why I had to do it in person, but you can't come after me. And Burry starts going, wait a minute. Are they holding her against her will? Like, why are they telling me she's dead? Something doesn't add up. And she can even talk to the Weaver about this. And Weaver's like, look, priesthood is scary. Like, if this is it, and she's like, no, I can't. And so now she gets in her head that she's going to rescue her sister. So the call to action is something that the sister says during their meeting. Burry misinterprets into, and of course, remember everything we're talking about here, as far as the sister going to church and going down to the basement, all that, the reader doesn't know any of that. That's all off screen. So that's all stuff that Burry will have to learn after she infiltrates the priesthood. So instead of when I said where the priesthood comes and sees you, or instead of you don't seek out the priesthood, they seek you. What if it is the other way, where the priesthood is just, you have to volunteer for the priesthood. So now Burry gets in her head that she's going to rescue her sister, and she's like, I'm going to go.
You definitely have to volunteer for the half adapted side of the priesthood.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Right? Yeah, the fully adapted, you're taken.
Yeah. But I mean, and Burry would be very well suited to saying, well, actually, I could be a really good teacher because she's done a chunk of things with Jiren that,
Well, I think you'd have to work up with that.
yeah.
That's a pretty prestigious spot, in my opinion. So I
Yeah.
think you volunteer for the priesthood and you do,
Yeah.
lower end stuff. Like you go to, and then if we go this route, this actually means the priesthood doesn't want her near. Like if we don't do the whole cancer thing runs in famous or whatever, it has nothing to do with that. So they're not interested in her at all. Like the priesthood has, and matter of fact, when she comes and volunteers, they would rather reject her, but they can't because, whatever. So now they're actively working against her. Now she thinks that they're working against her because they've done something, that they're hiding their sister and keeping her against her will and all that other stuff. When in actuality, what they're doing is they're just trying to protect themselves. They're trying to protect their secret. And so they're trying to keep her out. And that's going to make her go deeper and deeper and deeper.
It's not quite working for me. Like where we get is okay, but the motivation isn't quite right for me.
Okay.
It feels too convenient misunderstanding.
I can see that.
I'd like it to be a little bit more like real based.
We have a couple different ways.
I think it's something to think about.
I said this is two completely different ways to mix Bury in with the priesthood.
Yeah.
Both have, really good things about them. So we just need to think about which one we like the best and which one is going to give us the most conflict in the story.
See, what I want to get that device involved somehow, potentially. I don't know. I think we need to think a little bit more on this one. Like I like where the Bury storyline is going, but that call to adventure, that reason why she gets involved in the priesthood, I feel needs a little bit more.
Well, the reason why I like the second way that the one that I just went through is it's Bury being active. If we do the first way, the priesthood comes after her, then she's not as active in.
No, I like that one. I like that one. What I don't like, I like her being active. I like her pursuing the priesthood, all of that. What I don't like is the sister coming to her just out of like, oh, I don't want you to live. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather have the sister come to her with like, or send a message, like actually send a message to say, you can never tell anyone about that device. Like, have a reason beyond just, oh, my heart was too sore, thinking of you guys. You understand what I'm saying? Like I want the sister to have a stronger motivation there. And potentially.
Oh, it's the sister's motivation when you said motivation, I just thought you were talking about Bury's.
Yeah. So if the sister comes to Bury.
So, well, let me ask you a question. So you do like the idea of Bury being motivated by thinking that the priesthood is doing something bad to her sister and she wants to rescue her?
Not quite. Okay.
Okay.
But I do like the idea of Bury driving into the priesthood in order to try and figure out what's going on there, right? And what I think that if her sister came to her and she's like, you can never, ever tell anyone about that device, right? Because her sister's now been through all this indoctrination, but her sister knows that the device is what stabilized her adaptation process. And she knows like all of these things about it and she's like, oh, my sister has this device, and the sister doesn't know how the priesthood would react to that device, right? So she goes to Bury to warn her to like bury that device, throw it away, get rid of it, like you cannot use it again. And then Bury, like that can drive Bury to then be like, okay, they're doing something to my sister because of this device.
So if that's the case, then we would need to come up with a message that isn't. So like what popped in my head was this random stranger shows up and it's like, hey, I need to tell you a message.
Yeah.
You have a device, I've heard, and you're supposed to throw it away. Like you're supposed to just throw it away. And she's like, wait, how did you even know about that? And he's like, I can't tell you that. Or somebody paid me to come and tell you this. Well, who paid you? I don't know. The money just came, and she's like, so now she's like, only my sister knew about that. Although maybe she doesn't do that. maybe she's like, oh, Laron paid you to do this to me because Laron knows about the device. So that's why she goes and gets in touch with Laron. And Laron's like, I didn't send, what are you talking about? And that's when she's like, well, then there's only one other person. So she doesn't immediately go to my sister sent me this. If some stranger shows up and says, hey, I was sent this message to give to you. Somebody paid me to deliver. Maybe the stranger doesn't even know the message. Like, I was paid to give you this. And she puts it in and she reads it, on her thing or whatever. And it's just this cryptic, this device, you will get killed over, throw it in the garbage, destroy it, whatever. And she immediately is like, well, obviously Laren sent this to me. I mean, she wouldn't even go to her sister because in her mind, her sister's dead. And so she's like, well, obviously Laren sent this to me. I don't understand why this could revolutionize everything. This can save people with adaptation sickness. Why wouldn't we want to, have this out there? And so she goes to Laren to ask him his reason. He's like, why? I don't understand. This could save people. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't send that message. And you're right. It could save people. Although, let's keep it a secret now in case we need it. But you're right. And then she's like, well, there's only, like, you're the only one that knew. And he's like, you didn't tell anyone. And she's like, well, yeah, I did, but she's, and that's when she's like, wait a minute. She's not dead. And that could be the line. Like, yeah, I did, but she's, and then she pauses and she like, oh my God, she's not dead. And everyone's like, who's not dead? And then she just Burry just takes off running, doesn't explain anything to Lara. So I think that I think is a magical way for her to figure out.
Because then it's not just like, it's not just a misunderstanding, right? Her sister is trying to protect Burry from this device, and Burry obviously is now like, well, fuck this shit, I'm gonna go figure out where my sister is,
right. And I think that conversation needs to happen with the Weaver, where she's like, she's not dead, and she's like, look, I know, or he's like, I know this is what you hope for, and she's like, no, I got this message. What was the message about? Well, I can't tell you. Like, what do you mean you can't tell me? She's like, well, look, it can only come from her. Like, no, it can't. She's dead. And Burry, and then that would be the conflict between them, where she now starts going down this path of trying to figure out, the priesthood is doing something. Of course, the Weaver wants to help her, but she also can't include him, especially in the beginning. Maybe as time goes on, whatever, because again, he loved her too. And so if he can be convinced that she's alive, he could be an ally for her and help her out, in ways if we need it. Again, that's a thread that we could pull or not pull. But yeah, I like that a lot. Like, that's good. I really do like that motivation for her. And I can also see her sister going, I can see her sister in the first way that I threw out, where she's like, I just couldn't have you go through life thinking that I was dead. But I can also see her going, I can't tell her I'm alive because I'll never be able to see her again. And that's even worse than her just thinking. It's better that she thinks I'm dead.
Exactly.
But this device will get her killed.
Yes.
So I have to, if I don't intervene, she's going to die.
She's going to tell somebody because she's Burry. She's going to want to help somebody. And eventually, like, the secret is going to slip, and she's like, it's going to happen.
Yep. And so I can see her definitely going, I have to. And then she comes up, she's no CIA spy. So she's like, well, this will obviously work if I just send an anonymous message to her through a stranger that doesn't even know anything about anything. So obviously, because what else could she do? I mean, she's just a baker. And so she comes up with a plan that she's like, she'll never be able to trace it back to me. So like,
I mean, she's not a CIA operative or anything like that. It's a clumsy execution.
Right.
But that's perfect because it should be a clumsy execution.
Right. Well, and even if she did think it through and go, okay, maybe she thinks this came from me, she'll never be able to figure it out anyway. So who cares? Like, she still has to go on with life as if I'm dead. But if I don't do this, it could cause her harm. So I must do this. And even though I don't want to do this, I have to. So yeah, I really do like that. That's actually really cool.
Yes. Yeah, because that's what I didn't like. I felt that the sister's motivation was a bit flimsy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said,
Yeah.
when you said that, I was just thinking that you didn't like Bury actively going
No,
after it.
no.
So I'm
It's the
glad that we
system.
continued going down that. And again, just for the listeners, notice what I did. I asked for clarification. I said, all right, let me get this straight. Because if you assume what other people are trying to tell you, then you may never, I mean, I may have gone, okay, well, let's just look at a third, way
Yep.
now. So yeah, I think that here we
Good.
are just an hour later, and we've come up with, I think, both calls to adventure and both a good structure of where these two stories are going. And we still have a lot to work out, but where they're going to collide at the end, how they're going to, use that information to overcome the fact that the city is being taken out. So
By
yeah,
itself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
All right.
I think that's those are great call to adventures.
And I think that is a wrap for this plotting session. And we will see you soon for another episode.
Bye.